Hello, everyone. A very warm welcome to our joint webinar with AXELOS on cyber resilience and IT service management. Before I continue, I just want to make sure that you are able to see our slides and hear the audio. Okay, perfect. Very good. Okay, once again, a very warm welcome to all of you to this webinar. My name is Connie Tai. I'm from the marketing team at ITpreneurs. I will be your host and moderator today. During this live broadcast, you can submit your questions in the chat box, and we will cover as many as we can during the Q&A discussions at the end of the webinar. And also after the webinar, we will share the slides and the recordings with you. So thank you. Before we invite our guest speaker, I would like to find out a bit about the audience of today. So I'm going to launch first a poll to find out the type of organizations you are representing here. So your answers are coming in, so please provide that. Okay. All right, perfect. Thank you. I'm going to share the results with you. So most of you offer a mix of training and consulting. Very good. Then the next question. Have you added RESILIA to your training portfolio? Right, your answers are coming in. I'll just give it a few more seconds before we close that. Okay, all right, I'm going to share the results. So almost 60% of you are still evaluating. All right, I hope this webinar is very useful for you. Then the last question. What is your experience with delivering ITSM training? Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to close the poll and share the results. So half of you have extensive experience with ITSM training. All right, thank you very much. Then I'm going to continue to introduce our speaker of today. He's actually no stranger to us. I think a lot of you also attended some previous webinars delivered by Dan on RESILIA. So I'm really delighted to welcome here again, Dan. And today's topic is cyber resilience. Whose problem is it? So on that note, I'm going to change presenter. We're going to Dan's screen, and he will present from his computer.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Connie.
All right, it's working. Perfect. All right, so please go ahead, Dan.
Right, so afternoon, everyone, and yeah, welcome to this last RESILIA webinar of 2015. So today I want to talk about the issue of cyber resilience and whose problem is it. So interesting that yeah, most of you have given some feedback in terms of where you are as organisations. And interestingly, a lot of you do some consulting alongside training. They've got some experience with IT service management, because that fits into one of the themes I want to talk about today in terms of how IT service management specifically can play their part in the issue of who does own cyber resilience within an organisation. So it's a deliberately open question as to whose problem is cyber resilience, for which there's no straight answer. What we want to do today is just go through and understand, why does it matter whose problem is it? And when we break down whose problem is it, which areas of business are we talking about as an organisation? And what problem are we talking about? Because there's no single definition of ownership. And then I want to go through and talk about, talk about what some of the action plan can be for our customer organisations, specifically starting from that IT service management community, as to what can they do to play their part in addressing this issue. So let's start with, well, why are we talking about this now? Because cyber resilience has been an issue for quite a while. There have been a number of high-profile hacks and cyber resilience incidents, as you can see from the melee of logos and icons on the slide there. But it's increasing. The number of successful attacks is increasing. The amount of losses suffered by organisations have been increasing. And some of the negative exposure of both organisations and individuals within those organisations has also been increasing. So that in itself is an issue for organisations. But it's also prompting a response from other areas. So most notably, lawmakers, regulators, who are saying, yeah, this is now an area where we need to step into and force organisations to do more. And clearly something that generally, especially business, just doesn't like. Public sector, federal doesn't like either, are being told what to do because they haven't necessarily got their own house in order. So that fear of potential legislation, as well as the loss of competitive advantage, is driving the whole issue of cyber resilience further up the agenda of the organisation, and therefore making that question of whose problem is it an even more pertinent question today. I wanted to delve in just to one particular recent example. So any of you on the webinar are from the UK will know who TalkTalk is. For those of you who are not familiar with TalkTalk, it's a telephone and broadband company in the UK. One of the challengers to BT, who are the ex-state monopoly provider. One of the big telecoms providers, been very successful. But back in October, were the subject of a successful attack. And they decided to do what a lot of organisations do in these incidents, try and face it head on. Send out their chief executive, Dido Harding, onto the television to try and answer some of the questions around what happened, on the basis of the truth is going to out anyway, so you need to face up to it being an issue now. And clearly that then also prompts a whole load of other speculators to come out, and we were amongst them. You can see a picture of our own Nick Wilding, who was on BBC News, ITV News, and others, and you can Google some links to him talking about TalkTalk. And of course, as soon as you're out there, you're then a matter of public interest for commentators, experts, media, and social media and users to start picking apart what you're saying and analyse what you're doing as an organisation. So to just delve in slightly more into TalkTalk as an example, here are some of the things that TalkTalk, and specifically their chief executive, came out with in terms of quotes. So I'll allow you to read this on the screen. So clearly they've taken the approach of we need to respond now in the media, be out in the media, but they didn't really have their full story straight. So that's their media presence, and of course there's been the impact on their customers as well. So clearly you can see, and I know we're just picking on one example, but TalkTalk is just one example at the end of an increasingly long list that will go on of organisations that have not only found they have to deal with the technical issue, but they've had to deal with the media issue as well. And one of the things we want to come back to slightly later in the presentation, on this area of responsibility, whose problem is it? By putting herself on TV, Dido Harding made herself it personally relate to her as well. And this is one of the things that we'll come on to talk about in terms of getting that senior executive sponsorship a risk and something that can be used as well in terms of taking on responsibility. But let's take a step back for a moment from the the fear and some of the negative stories, and have a look at some of the balance that we're talking about. So some of you may have seen some of these numbers from us already, but the whole area of cyber is around that balance between opportunities and risks. So clearly TalkTalk was out there. They've been an innovator. They've used a lot of IT in terms of online sign-ups, in terms of customer support, to be able to gain market share, to undercut competitors in the market, whether it's in terms of price or providing good packages. So clearly they've seen those opportunities. But of course the risks go with it as well. And you can't be in business and you can't take advantage of those opportunities unless you're prepared to accept some of those risks. And one of the ones we want to come back to a few times is this: 95% of all security incidents involving human error. And I think this is one of the things we need to get clear when we're talking about whose problem is cyber, is saying, well, what is the cyber problem? And fundamentally, cyber resilience problem is a human problem. The human factor is the key part within cyber resilience. And therefore, when we're saying whose problem is it, we need to understand, well, who has responsibility for those humans, for educating them, for making sure that they are aware of developing that cyber resilience culture. So balance of opportunity and risk, that's ultimately what the leadership team, the board, the senior people within most organizations care about. But we drill that down to a lower level within to IT teams, and the whole concept of balance still applies. So for example, prevention, detection or correction, how much do you try and get the balance within that? Do you try and you see TalkTalk on the TV, try and avoid at all costs being in that instance? Well, you could do that, but what happens if it does happen? Are you then ready to deal with the correction side of things, the recovery from that cyber attack? If you put all your effort on preventing it, you're making a one-way bet that you're not going to get hacked, and as current incidents show, that's going to be a pretty poor bet. People, process, technology. We've mentioned that people are the biggest vulnerability, but also the biggest chance to address the issue and build a more resilient organization. But that can only happen through having some process and through using the right technology, to getting that balance right, and risk and opportunity. But when it comes to people and whose problem is it, it's great saying these things and saying, right, we need to get this balance right, we need to understand where we want to sit on there. But actually, who does make those decisions? Who decides where the balance is? And do those people making the decision on where the balance is actually have the knowledge and skills to do so? Do they have the governance and the buy-in and the authority to do that on behalf of their organisation? So before we look at that specifically, I want to show you this, and I'm sure everybody has seen this. Seen this or heard this before? So, slightly tongue-in-cheek, putting this up, and anybody who's worked in the IT service management area for any length of time will be all too familiar around the risk, around the area of ownership and taking responsibility and finding the right people within an organisation. But if we take it specifically in terms of cyber resilience, let's look at who might have ownership of the issue, but what is also preventing them from taking what we ideally might want in terms of the leadership role. So the board, they might quite rightly say, we have risk and security teams. If they want to bring investment or risk cases to us, we can look at them. Yeah, quite rightly. They're not there to try and work out what the organisation needs to do on cyber resilience. They're there to maximise value in the business to their stakeholders, be those shareholders in a commercial organisation, be that taxpayers or government in a federal situation. So yeah, they've set up and provided resources for teams to bring issues to them. The risk and information security areas. They may well say, we set security standards and policies, we need everybody to stick to those, and we will check compliance. Yeah, quite rightly, those, as we'll see later, in the scheme of things, the information security teams are quite small. They're stretched, they can't be everywhere, and the way you can maximise your impact is by setting standards and guidance for the rest of the organisation. They do their audits, they ensure they're compliant with law, but is that really leading to the organisation being either secure or resilient? Probably not. Information owners. So those people that have the strongest interest in protecting information, either because it's got an intrinsic value or they need that information to be able to do business. So quite rightly, they are not involved in security or IT. They are involved in running the business of the organisation. They might say, we flag the information as sensitive and needs protecting. So go and do that. It's not their responsibility to work out, does a database need to be encrypted? Is it secured with the right access permissions? They just know that that information needs protecting. So a lot of the focus, therefore, comes back on the IT and delivery teams. So quite rightly, they would say, yes, we do own those services, but we don't have the detailed technical knowledge to do everything. And I think this pretty much sums up one of the issues. The reality is that all of those areas have responsibility for cyber resilience. So whose problem is it? It's everybody's problem. From the board, we need to set the right tone, the right culture across an organisation, through to the IT teams that need to build it into services, the information owners who need to understand what they're doing with their information, and the risk teams need to help ensure compliance. Everybody has their part to play within an organisation in ensuring that they build that resilience within the organisation. But we think back to what I just said earlier about everybody, somebody, anybody, and nobody. That doesn't really help us in terms of pinning it down a bit more precisely. One area we should look at, and this comes from the RESILIA Best Practice Guide, is roles and responsibilities. So if we actually want to build an action plan for an organisation for deciding who needs to take responsibility of what, then obviously roles and responsibilities is a good place to start. So within cyber resilience, you've got three key areas of roles and responsibility. You've got governance, so governance in terms of the information that the organisation has, in terms of the policy. That's driven by the board. It's driven by the audit, so whether that's internal audit and compliance teams, or whether that's external regulation-driven audit, ensuring that an organisation is compliant and is meeting its governance requirements. The information owners are a key part of that as well. Again, we go back to something in say, the retail environment. So we look at, again, back to our TalkTalk example. Their customer data, their information owners will have known that they needed to keep that safe, to meet their obligations under Data Protection Acts, under PCI DSS for those customers paying by credit card. They know that they have obligations and therefore they need to set that governance tone. That overlaps with leadership and management. So providing the tools, providing the guidance for what needs to happen to make cyber resilience. So risk and security management are a key part there. They will often help oversee that day-to-day work to ensure that the governance requirements are going to be hit, for example. IT strategy and services. So here we've got the CIO's office and the whole area of IT development, IT service management, setting a strategy that needs to take into account cyber resilience as well, in terms of how does that fit into the strategy of the services we're going to deliver. And then you've got delivery. So clearly having governance and having a strategy is great, but that's a fairly static part. Delivery is where it needs to be dynamic. So IT service delivery, specifically for the IT services that are holding information and delivering information, and the business owners as well, in terms of process. So the processes that are flowing through the business on a day-to-day basis that are making use of the information the business has and are making use of the IT services that the business runs. So all of those are interdependent. One of the things you can't do, of course, is neatly put 18 in each of those boxes. You can see on there the business operations, for example, have clearly got some responsibility for delivery and some responsibility for governance. So one of the first starting points on defining cyber resilience and defining whose problem is it within an organisation is to study that area of roles and responsibilities. What roles do we need to give out? What roles do we need to have within the organisation? What roles can we not combine, the so-called toxic combination of roles? For example, you can't be a delivery team and an auditing team because you're auditing your own work. So how can we get that segregation going? And once you've started that, that's the first step to creating a much clearer idea of where the responsibilities lies. And I'll put down further reading. So this comes directly from section 9 of the RESILIA Best Practice Guide. So yeah, a good example to talk to customers about some of the practical guidance that you can get within RESILIA. So okay, that's potentially a good starting point. That gives us a good idea of the areas that we need to track. But we still need to pin it down a little bit further. And ultimately, it's about building collaboration. No role can be specifically tied down to an individual. We've always said, cyber resilience is everybody's issue. And for it to be everybody's issue, we need everybody to collaborate together to move from being individuals to collaborating on cyber resilience. And of course, one of the keys here is somebody taking the lead. Somebody saying, how can we collaborate? What's our action plan for collaborating? What are we going to collaborate on? And this is the key area where IT service management and the IT team in particular are best placed to perform that role. Especially IT have exposure and knowledge of what clearly all the services that are being provided across an organisation. And they also touch all areas of the business usually, from users to information owners, to sponsors and leadership team, to all the different teams within IT. So having that holistic view across an organisation makes them ideally placed to start the collaboration process and to give that some real meat and to build resilience across an organisation. So, if we want to actually build a collaboration plan, let's go down to a few specifics. And again, there's some further reading that will flag up as we go through in terms of some practical areas that the IT service management team can look at and that can collaborate across the organisation. So, point number one, I guess, is starting at home. So, within IT and service management, how can that team start building a more resilient organisation and taking responsibility for their cyber resilience problem? It's a large and diverse team, which is a strength. There's a lot of different skills within IT. Can be a weakness as well, because clearly nobody has a broad overall responsibility for everything. So building that common language and knowledge is absolutely key. It's no good having a handful of cybersecurity specialists and then everybody else not really knowing much about it. And one of the bits of further reading and obviously follow-up for those teams is therefore the Cyber Resilience Foundation and the Best Practice Guide. That's one of the specific things that will do is build that common language, that common knowledge, so that everybody can be at least on the same understanding, same degree of technical understanding when they're collaborating with each other. Managing the business value, this comes back to our opportunities and risk balance. So again, IT service management are ideally placed to do that. They understand the costs of delivering service. They can easily understand the risks of getting it wrong and the value of that information. So unlike the risk and compliance team who are there to try and reduce down the risks, IT also interface with areas of the business who need new services to take advantage of new opportunities who aren't necessarily seeing the risk. So that position in the middle in terms of being able to conduct that balance is another ideal way for building collaboration across the organisation. So that's a good place to start. The second area to look at that's critical for a collaboration plan is the information security team. So typically, in most organisations, this is a small team. They often do have an extended network of specialists that they can call on, but that tends to be even smaller in terms of number of people. They do, however, have a lot of specialist technical knowledge and skills, which is kind of obvious that they have those skills. I think the key thing for collaboration is allowing everybody to play to their strengths. So what information security teams get really bogged down in and stops them from collaborating properly is because they're having to do the basics, the stuff that actually is right at the bottom end of their skill level. Stopping people clicking on phishing emails, dealing with poorly configured access controls to applications and auditing those. The sort of stuff that actually anybody within IT can do. So why not free up this team from having to do the operational basics to instead concentrate on what they're best at, which is providing that real specialist knowledge. So it comes back to when we talked about the IT service management team having a good understanding of the basics. If they've got an understanding of the basics, they know how far their knowledge will stretch, and they know when to bring in the experts. So we use an example which comes back to TalkTalk example. If you've got a customer database which has got billing details, everybody within IT should know that that needs to be protected. It needs some form of encryption. It needs strong access controls over that. That sort of knowledge should be present in everybody, from a business analyst, through a service manager, through a release and change manager. What those people don't need to know, though, is exactly how you're going to encrypt it. What's the right level of key length to do that encryption? And that's where you bring your specialists in. And that's a good example of how collaboration should work within an organisation. And you've identified who has those right roles and responsibilities, because you've got a shared knowledge and a shared common language that you can use to build that collaboration. So a third area, and a third team, is the board and leadership team. So they are critical in building a collaboration because they set the tone. They look at business opportunity and risk, back to our balance again, but they won't look at details. They want issues brought to them, they can make decisions, they'll take responsibility for the organisation, but only if they're managed in the right way as sponsors for organisation-wide collaboration, rather than people who are going to make decisions on the details. Now, one of the things that's becoming increasingly prevalent here is this area of personal responsibility and reputation. We come back to our TalkTalk example again. How much of a battering has Dido Harding's reputation taken personally by her appearing as the spokesperson for all of the TalkTalk issues? Clearly clearly she felt she had to, as a leader of that organisation. But it's probably not a position she really wanted to be in, not having the knowledge, looking like she didn't know what was going on in her own organisation. And we should never underestimate the fear factor that can create in other leadership teams. Leave aside their responsibilities to the organisation, what about their own personal reputation? So, yeah, generally in cyber resilience, we don't want to solely play on fear, but that is a valid fear that a lot of leadership teams are having, and you're probably picking up, talking to some of those organisations, things they want to try and put in place to avoid them being the next person that has to stand up on BBC News. So the fourth area of building collaboration is the information owners. So the key thing about the information owners is they do understand the value of their information. They understand that if they've got a lot of customer data, how much that is worth to them to be able to carry on running the organisation. They know that their area of the business will grind to a halt if they do not have that information. Probably what they can't do is easily quantify what are the vulnerabilities. What's the risk-adjusted value of that information? What's the value of it were it to be stolen from the organisation? They know how much it is of value to them, but you need to put more context around it to be able to prioritise where you need to focus. Because clearly most information owners will often think that their information is highly valuable and needs protection, but we need to put some degree of prioritisation down, otherwise we won't get the buy-in from the board and the senior sponsors, because they'll just see a sea of red and often tend to disengage at that point. So if we provide a structure on quantifying risk, a simple to use structure that allows information owners to be helped to better understand not only what's the value of their information, but what's the risks to their information, and therefore where do we need to put it in terms of the priority for protection. And we should always remember that protecting information is not just about making it secure so it's not stolen. It's about making sure that information is available. It's about making sure that information is correct. So, one of the key principles in cybersecurity is that CIA, confidentiality, integrity, and availability. And the balance between those three factors will vary according to the organisation, to the organisation and to the information itself. So again, having that common language and that ability to collaborate and talk between the IT teams and the information owners around where they see their information is really important to building collaboration. And then the final area that we need to touch on in terms of building collaboration is IT users and staff. Clearly, this definitely includes everybody, without exception. So by far the largest risk, so we come back to our earlier stats, it's either 90% or 95%, depending on which report you read, of cybersecurity attacks and incidents involve some form of human error. So whether that's everything from people clicking on something they shouldn't do, people losing information inadvertently, people deliberately passing information, being malicious with it. There are very, very few attacks that are purely technical, that just rely on exposing vulnerabilities. Invariably, there is some form of human error at some point in there. But that's not the risk with that one. Is that you think humans are the weak part, and so you go for technology and try and design humans out. But that's a mistake, and that comes to our point here, that people are more adaptable than technology or process. If we can build the right proactive culture change within an organisation to get that cyber resilience collaboration across everybody, to have some ownership, so everybody feels some ownership of the issue, then not only can that be significantly more effective than technical controls, but it's also a lot more adaptable, change risks as they come along, and also can be significantly cheaper as well. So rather than investing in yet more technology that's not stopping attacks as it stands, far better to invest in culture change and having a staff that really understands what cyber resilience is all about. And the final point on that one, which is specifically where IT can play their part, is back to balance again. The balance of security and usability, opportunity and risk in a different form. Again, one of the knee-jerk reactions to cybersecurity incidents can be to lock down things further. The problem with locking down things further is it makes it hard for IT users to go about doing their day-to-day job, and invariably they then find ways around it. So unintended consequences, you actually end up creating more of a cybersecurity risk than you started with by trying to lock things down. Much better to engage with the user community and to understand where that right balance is for the organisation. So it's the five areas of the organisation that need to be involved in building that collaboration, and five areas of the organisation for whom cyber resilience is all of their problems. So, if we're looking to bring it all together, so what does good look like? We've been through what some of the issues are. We've been through some of the examples. We've identified some areas of an organisation that needs to collaborate. So what does good look like? So a couple of things. So lifecycle management is a really key part of building a resilient organisation, moving beyond just security and having that adaptable, resilient nature to the organisation. So typically, yes, having cybersecurity managed within an existing management system, for example, that is a key part of lifecycle management, and that allows organisations to leverage existing investments. So clearly, anybody who's familiar with IT service management will recognise that the cyber resilience best practice is built on the ITIL lifecycle. ITIL being a proven way to manage IT processes within an organisation. It's far better to leverage that existing lifecycle management approach because then you'll have everybody collaborating, working across the same management system, the same understanding of how to manage things. The other reason that lifecycle management is part of best practice is it enables an organisation to balance out the areas that different teams are better or worse at. It's not unusual for a lot of IT teams to be service management to be quite good at operation, but sometimes not have some of those areas of strategy totally nailed down. Whereas that can often be the flip side of IT security, is that a lot of time is spent on process within the strategy or design areas, and not enough time spent on continual improvement based on operational incidents. So having all of those teams collaborate on a life cycle is going to get that continuous improvement and that life cycle being managed well. So I thought I'd end with a few questions that you can ask yourself as an organisation, and we can go out and ask organisations, indeed, as to how comfortable they feel in terms of are they managing their cyber resilience well as an organisation. So the first one, do you know what your critical information assets are and who has responsibility for them? So I think yeah, a lot of organisations will know what their critical information assets are, but they do know the value of those assets. Do they know the value of them if they're lost or stolen? And do they understand who's got responsibility for them in terms of delivery, in terms of governance, and in terms of leadership? The question organisations should keep asking themselves over and over again as they get better and they should start feeling more and more comfortable with the answers they can provide as they get better at building resilience. The second one, and a kind of an obvious one, is everyone involved in cyber resilience. This comes back to really the answer to our question of cyber, whose problem is it? Well, it is everybody's problem, but everybody needs to know their role within cyber resilience. But not only that, does everyone who's involved have the knowledge to make good decisions, the autonomy to make good decisions? Is it seen as being a priority within the organisation? If we've got that right degree of sponsorship, that right degree of education across the organisation, then generally you'll be able to get a solid, positive answer to that question, rather than a tentative, well, yeah, we think so, answer to that question. And I guess the final one that we would ask is, are you prepared for when a successful attack comes? And the emphasis here is on the when. Yeah, typically there are two types of organisations, the ones that have been hacked and know about it, and the ones that have been hacked and don't know about it. There are very, very few organisations who've had no attacks of any description. It's just a question of what are they doing when that happens. I think almost all IT teams accept that they can't build enough defences to never have an issue. So it's about how they deal with those issues when they come up, so that they can avoid being the next talk. So does everyone know their roles? Does everyone have the skills to carry through those roles when the attack comes? And are they using a tried and tested operational process that therefore just clicks through like clockwork when an attack comes, rather than having to bring out a completely new and untried and untested process for doing things? So three seemingly simple but fundamental questions that an organisation should be asking themselves on a continuous basis to feel more and more comfortable if they've got to the bottom of whose problem is it, and have they put in place those things to deal with it. So finally, I wanted to finish on just describing the RESILIA portfolio. Because clearly everything we've been talking through today is based on the cyber resilience best practice, so the RESILIA portfolio. And as some of you should be familiar with this, because you take this portfolio as it is, and some may not be. So it is a portfolio approach, as we've discussed in terms of responsibilities. We need to address all areas within an organisation. This is not just about providing training to an IT team, because that's only part of the solution. So the whole portfolio is underpinned by the best practice guide, so identifying in practical terms what an organisation needs to do. But then we need to bring in the different areas with different services. So pathway tool and leadership engagement is critical to engage those senior leaders within an organisation to be able to provide the sponsorship to cyber resilience, the sponsorship for that collaboration and cultural change within the organisation. So the pathway tool specifically to identify the areas of focus and leader engagement as well. We talked about all IT staff having a role to play, and that's where the individual awareness learning comes in. All IT users are a potential risk and vulnerability, and all IT users can also be part of the solution if they've been through the right degree of training as to understanding the risks and their responsibilities. And then the owners of IT, the deliverers of IT, they need more detailed training. So we've talked about having that shared knowledge, that understanding where the IT teams, whether they're a business analyst, a service manager, project manager, an architect, where all those people fit into their role within cyber resilience. So foundation and practitioner training, coupled with CPD to keep those skills current, is the final part of that human factor answer to cyber resilience. So that kind of brings me to the end of what I wanted to cover today in terms of the issue of cyber, whose problem is it. So hopefully people have found that interesting, thought-provoking, potentially useful in terms of understanding where cyber Resilience best practice to help answer that question and around what some of the issues that our customer organisations may well be facing.
Okay, thank you very much, Dan. I think it's very stimulating for most of the audiences. As you explained how ITSM is in a very advantageous position in building the collaboration with all areas in the organization and also with business. And so our audience today, right, a lot of them actually, they do provide training and consulting to the ITSM teams. So this is very useful, I think, materials for them to bring into their conversation with their customers.
Yeah, absolutely. If there's one thing I could leave as a takeaway in terms of what RESILIA is all about, it is that training to bring IT service management into cyber resilience, into giving them the skills to extend their knowledge beyond just IT service delivery and to understand everything they need to know around IT, including cyber resilience.
So we'll have some time for questions from the audience. So do post your questions in the chat box. In the meantime, I just want to switch back to our slides here. Because some of you also mentioned that you are still in the consideration stage if you will be adding RESILIA to your portfolio. So I just want to say a few words about how to get started. So ITpreneurs is a provider of training content and services to IT training consulting companies. So by working with us, you can utilize our comprehensive portfolio, and meaning that you can broaden and deepen your training portfolio while you reduce the cost of content development and maintenance. So we are an appointed courseware provider for RESILIA, and as you can see that we have a lot of experience in developing training content. We work on a purely business to partner model. So that means we do not offer training ourselves, so we don't compete with our partners. We offer a bridge to make working in the IT training ecosystem easier for everyone involved. And we can manage the accreditation process, source exams from exam institute, so you can conveniently deliver the training. In terms of our RESILIA portfolio, we have the foundation classroom and also the practitioner classroom. In addition, you can also utilize our foundation e-learning in combination maybe with a practitioner classroom training if your customers are looking for more fast-track training. And this is an overview of the operating model for RESILIA under AXELOS scheme. So you can work with us as we are an appointed courseware provider, or you can also work with us being an affiliate, because we are also an ATO for RESILIA. So we got very good news from AXELOS recently that the free RESILIA training exams has been extended until the end of May next year. We will be organizing a number of train-the-trainer webinars in the new year for both foundation and practitioner level. So you can pre-register your interest on our website already. You see the link to our website. So I think this is a very good opportunity for those of you who this year, because you were very busy at that time, that you didn't get the opportunity to join the train-the-trainer session or pass the exam. So there's still time. And if you're not a partner yet, you can easily become one. So contact us, and we'll be very happy to speak with you to discuss how we can work with you on RESILIA or some other portfolios that you are interested in. So on that note, I will look at the questions that have come in. First one, has the pathway to an awareness training been launched? If not, when? Okay,
so it's a good question. I want to provide a bit of a trailer for that. So no, they haven't officially been launched yet. They'll both be launched in the first quarter of 2016. So awareness learning, keep an eye out, because we will be announcing some webinars and some information on that in January. So that'll be coming out when we'll be providing an overview of that product and starting the launch process. So it will become available then. The pathway tool, we are in our final development phase at the moment. Given we're going through it in an agile approach, using our own Prince2 agile approach, we are looking at exactly at what point we make it available, but it's likely to be late February for first release of the pathway tool. And for those of you who aren't familiar with the pathway tool, what it will allow you to do is it will appear as a web tool on AXELOS to allow end users to come along and have a look through and see where they might sit. And it also allows signed up partners to conduct more in-depth assessments of what an organisation needs to do based on where they are currently in terms of cyber resilience. And in case anybody's thinking the question, it's a free tool, so it'll be free to use for our partners and free to use for end customers. It's designed to drive that interest in the portfolio.
Okay, thank you. Hope Dan has answered your question, Maren. Okay, the next question came from Simona. She's asking, Dan, do you think that most organizations avoid taking something like RESILIA on as they are afraid how that they are admitting the need for it and will reduce their market reputation or seen as unsafe to do business with?
Yeah, it's a really good question, that, because you're right. A lot of senior leadership can almost not want to know what the answer is because they fear the answer. So yes, there is a certain amount of that. Although I think with everything that's happened in terms of attacks and everything that's potentially coming in terms of legislation, organisations I do understand that they do need to address their issues and look through it. But you are right that they don't want to give away much information about where their vulnerabilities or what their issues might be, either because it tarnishes their reputation or because they're fearing that somebody will use that information as a way to start an attack against them. So yes, it is an issue, and one of the things that we would say to all of you when you're going and engaging is that hence that need for senior level engagement and to do that on a sensitive basis such that you can build up the trust and be able to work confidently, but also confidentiality and in confidence with customers to help them address their issues without them fearing what a leak of that information might lead to.
Okay, yeah, because they certainly have a need for it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. Let me see. I'm not seeing further questions come. Oh, one more. Will RESILIA trainers be required to sign some kind of NDA for running on-site courses due to some of the information that might be discussed in the classroom?
So clearly that's obviously going to be down to yourselves and the customer. But yes, it's something on the back of the previous answer. It's something to consider because it's a way that you can build more trust with an organisation, and the more trust you can have, the more you can do for them. So yes, it's something that, to be honest, I haven't come across in terms of organisations asking for it, but it's good to be aware that you can either proactively offer it or that it may well be required. Certainly, I think it's a reason why a lot of organisations will want to do closed courses on their own premises rather than send their people potentially to open courses. And I think, as a lot of you are aware, you tend to get quite a good interaction, especially if you're in the consulting area as well. You tend to be able to help a customer a lot more as you can do those closed courses and talk to them about their own problems rather than just talk generically about case studies and the right examples.
Yeah. Okay. I think that's all the questions for today. So thank you again, Dan, for this great session. and also everyone here. And I want to wish also everyone happy holidays. And I'm sure that we will bring Dan back in the new year with more webinars on RESILIA to help our partners and also maybe also some other providers to get more understanding about this portfolio and how they can utilize that to help their customers. So once we close the webinar, there will be a quick survey about today, and we would really like you to put in your comments and feedback and also suggestions for sessions for next year. And so thank again to everyone for coming today, and see you in the new year. Happy holidays.